So, made an offer on a flat yesterday, which is literally just that there. And in order to use it as service accommodation, so an offer to purchase the property. Couple of differences to the norm in that I'm prepared to pay full market value for the property. So that sounds a bit weird, right? The reason is that the lease on the property allows serviced accommodation, and there are other service accommodation properties in the building, and it looks out on this marina and out to sea, and the Brittany ferry comes in just over there, etc. So it's a really interesting, all the princess yachts getting snagged prior to the owners getting them. It's a really interesting view, right? And the apartment, like I say, allows service accommodation, and it's in an up and coming area. So actually I'm thinking, well, I'll pay market value for the property because it's going to appreciate, because there's an awful lot of development going on. You can see, new apartment blocks going up all of the time, and there's more over there, and so the area is being gentrified, so the area is going to force appreciate. So at some point that will build the equity in the property. And actually, if it's an apartment with that sort of view, because you rarely get that with houses, and that's going to be perfect for serviced accommodation. So I'm willing to pay market value. Problem being, the owner has given me a go away offer. So I asked the agent whether the owner will sell. It's currently let out, and the agent came back to me and said that they would take 250, and I think the property is worth 200 to 220. And why do I think that? Well, I've looked at comparables, I've looked at other similar properties, their sold price. You should always look at the condition of the property, look at the property history tab on Rightmove Zoopla to see what it looked like on the inside when the property sold. There's no point in thinking a property's only, compare it. You've got to compare like for like. So if it's really tied and dated inside, you've got to appreciate that when looking at what it sold for, right? Obviously it makes sense. Now then, so looking at the data, and there are different websites as well that predict what a property might be worth, because it looks at available data and land registry sold prices, etc. So that's what has made me think there's worth about 200 to 220. But the owner said you can have it for 250. So I replied saying, well, I think it's worth 200 to 220 because of what I've done, but what I'm prepared to do is potentially get a surveyor in and see what the surveyor says. Now, if you apply for a mortgage, then the bank is going to send one of their surveyors to value the property, and what happens is if they agree with the purchase price, the surveyor, then that's fine. You will get potentially 75% loan to value on a short-term rental type mortgage. Now, they will value the property as if it's a buy-to-let, okay, currently, because they stress test the property to see whether or not it would also wash its face as a buy-to-let. So at the cheaper end of the market, 200,000, it's the cheaper end of the market these days, right? In Plymouth with a nice view. Well, that's going to stack, okay, with 75% loan to value as a buy-to-let. It's to do with the mortgage rent ratio, and the rent has to be 125% of the monthly mortgage payment, right? Anyway, so it's going to stack. And the problem is, if they don't value it at 250, right, then what they'll do is, say they value it at 220, then they'll say, well, we'll lend based on a 220, and then you've got to come up with the extra 30k. So that's a big issue, because there's no way I'm going to be putting, as well as the deposit and the stamp duty, another 30k in if the valuer only values it at 220. So what I've said is okay, so we'll proceed on the 250 purchase price, but if the valuer only values it at between, say, 200 and 220, that's what I would be prepared to pay. and so it might cost me a valuation fee. But what I'm doing is I've asked whether that would be feasible to the owner. So I've asked via the agent whether that would be feasible to the owner, that they would still sell in the region of 200 to 220 based on what the surveyor said. Now, obviously, I didn't want to offend the agent because sometimes agents don't know these things, right? So I said, oh, obviously, as you know, so that keeps the agent on side. And I obviously didn't want to offend the owner as well, so I'm putting it on the surveyor. But what I also said is if the bank has a panel of surveyors and you're able to choose one of the surveyors, because that quite often is the case, I'm happy for the owner to choose which surveyor, because obviously, I don't know, an owner might think that for some reason I've got a surveyor in my back pocket and I'm going to be able to influence the valuation. I also said that I'm happy to not be present when the survey takes place, so the agent can give access to the surveyor and I won't be there, because obviously what the owner might be worried about is that I'm going to influence the surveyor and talk down the property and talk down the area to try and get the valuation down. By the way, whenever you are getting refinances done and you've got tenants in a property, do not allow tenants to show surveyors around, because that does influence the surveyor and tenants will slag off the area and the property to try and get cheaper rent. So the point is, surveyors can, I know they'd like to think they don't, but they can be influenced. So that's what I've suggested to the owner, and or via the agent. And it's one of those things, if they just dismiss it out of hand, what have I lost? If they're willing to consider my proposal that if the surveyor values it at 250, then that's fine. But if the surveyor values it lower, then whatever their valuation is, that's what I'd be prepared to pay. If they're willing to consider that, then it's worth me doing a application and paying for the survey. So don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. That's the way I'm playing it. We'll see what happens. I will keep you posted, because here's the thing, it's all about negotiating but without offending. Okay, it's one of the big things about selling, okay, about sales. You've got to get the person you're selling to forgive you by making an offer, forgive you making the offer that they don't necessarily agree with. So I'm putting it all on the surveyor. So hopefully that makes sense. Here's to your success in property investing and getting offers accepted, and from me, the property sold. Remember, your future prosperity needs you to get a yes to your offer. Take care.